I seen everything. But the craziest shit I ever seen.
You know, you ain't wrong about this butter pecan.
Was a nigga who came back from the dead.
Now it just looked like Rock saw a ghost, and I think she's going to be wishing that it was a ghost, because Unique is back to make her life living hell. But this reaction is something we've seen a few times across the Power universe. When Tommy turned up at Angela's funeral, when Ghost saw Tatiana return with Milan, when Ghost was grabbed up by Kanan back in Power Season 4, or when Tariq, Kane and Effie saw Lauren. Rock's look was priceless, and I think she's going to be in for the toughest test she's ever had, because she's going to have issues firing her way in every single direction. Unique's been playing a ghost for 6 months. That's how long he's been gone for, 6 months. Slowly plotting, putting the pieces in position, and now that he's got the backing of Phil Russo, Quan, his soldiers from Akbar, the intel from OC inside Kanan's organization, he is now the best place to come out as a real winner in Season 4. But episode 406 really was an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. Kanan and Jukebox were looking for revenge, but a lot of these characters had mixed emotions. I think some had a mental fog, feeling of guilt, hurt, anger, pain, and confusion, but some of them are beginning to turn that into revenge. We also learned more about Famous in terms of how he was assisting law enforcement, and I do think if he was cooperating, just like Garcia mentioned, then they really should have given him more protection. But we're definitely going to be diving deep into this Famous situation, along with all the main talking points, clues, and conversations from All Things Raising Kanan, episode 406, The Price of Fame.
What we don't always know is when it ends, or how it ends. That's because sometimes shit don't end, at least not how we think. We start things we can't stop. We do shit we can't undo. And the only way we know it's over is when it circles back.
You wanted to be in it? You in it.
Now, we pick up in episode 406 with the Thomases at Cafe Vu. Towards the end of 405, Kanan found out that his best friend was officially gone, which is what he feared the most when he had this conversation with Lou. And you can really tell, he's taking the death of Famous really hard. Even though towards the end of Season 3, they weren't exactly on the same page, and it does have to be said, at times, Kanan did treat Famous like shit. They may have been best friends, but when it comes to Kanan's street operation, we all knew Famous just wasn't built for the streets. They said it early in Season 1, that's how far back they laid the breadcrumbs. They said that this is the shit that D-Wiz would have been down for. He also kicked him out of his own apartment, and started to build this business relationship with Ronnie Mathis instead. So, towards the end, their relationship wasn't exactly in a great place. But as with all best friends, as we've seen it with all brothers across the Power universe, they fight, deliver some home truths, sometimes even throw fists, but they will always be brothers. I just wish they hadn't left their relationship in the way they did towards the end of Season 3, because sure, Famous definitely weren't built for this. He made mistakes, he may have been talking to law enforcement, but he really was a likable character. Now, in terms of Kanan's narration at the beginning, again, it was raw, a glimpse into Kanan's mind where he's kind of just on the edge at this moment in time. At this point in Kanan's life, we're seeing him turn into a hardened gangster. We're now seeing him turn from a pup into a wolf, which is what Sam the Crackhead warned Detective back in Season 2. It's almost likely gonna isolate Kanan even more, and we already know he's kind of a lone wolf by nature, but Famous's death is gonna isolate him even more. If he can lose his best friend, then nobody is safe. It's gonna make him double down on being colder, using it as a shield. But we've spoken about this before. Beneath the shield for many of these characters is vulnerability, rage, and guilt. For Kanan, no doubt, he's gonna be using this as an armor, a shield. But psychologically, he's torn between pain, hurt, guilt, anger, and wanting revenge. When the older Kanan says, "You're gone for good," he's not naive. He is beginning to learn that the streets don't let you retire in peace. He knows that this is gonna end up becoming a pattern. And the more you lose people, the more you're going to begin to lose yourself. Just like he said towards the end of 404, there are 1,000 ways to die, and for Kanan, losing Famous, that's one way to kill a piece of Kanan inside. He's lost a piece of himself, and slowly he's now becoming dead inside, just like Jukebox. I definitely still think he needs to lose more pieces of his soul, and I do think Crystal will be another. Being betrayed by OC will definitely make him turn it up a notch as well, but we are going to come back around to both a bit later on in the breakdown. Elsewhere at Cafe Vu, Kanan wasn't the only one who was taking it hard, so was Lou. This is someone who had a real close bond with Famous in a different way. He loved Famous because he could see the raw talent. He invested a lot of time and effort into Famous. He put his arm around him and tried to keep him away from the streets, and more so in the studio. He was trying to protect him. So, you've got Lou saying Kanan isn't the only one who wants revenge, but right now isn't the right moment. He did say he was going to make an exception for Fame, but not yet, and I definitely do believe Lou. I think he'll definitely want to put things right, not just for Fame, but also for himself, for Kanan, for Jessica. We also saw her return, and we also saw how upset she was. We saw how upset Famous's mom's was. It was a moment where everybody was reflecting on their loved ones, what they've lost, but also what they still have. Now just another little observation. We did see Rock having a moment where she was comforting Famous's moms, which did actually remind me of the time when she went to visit D-Wiz's moms. And if it does turn out to be the case where Rock could have been involved in Famous's death, this scene is going to hit even different. It may be a deja vu kind of moment. Now Lou and Kanan weren't the only ones who wanted to avenge Famous, so did Jukebox. She wanted in as soon as Kanan found out who was responsible, but Rock came over and told Kanan, just take a breather. Don't do anything stupid because law enforcement will be keeping close tabs on Famous's circle. Juke promised that she'll keep an eye on him, but Juke wanted exactly what Kanan wanted. They both wanted revenge. Now the following morning we got to see various different perspectives to how everybody was taking Famous's death. From Lou, Jukebox, Olga Figueroa, everybody was dealing with the loss quite different. First, with Kanan. He's definitely angry. His facial expressions, his demeanor, you can tell this is someone who's just waiting to explode. He wanted information from the streets. He wanted to know what the streets were saying at this moment in time. But as usual, they're not saying anything. So, Kanan's making this a top priority, even above his operation. You've got OC flip-flopping between whether there is or isn't product, which Kanan did definitely question. But I do think at the forefront of his mind and the top priority is get revenge for Fame. Now on OC, he really is a big snake. I'm not sure who he was on the phone to that he cut off just as Kanan walked in. But towards the end of 405, we did learn that OC is now working for Unique. He's Unique's eyes and ears within Kanan's operation, where he gets drip-fed information in regards to what's happening at the top, which of course is Rock and Marvin, and how they were hit with a 20% price increase, Kanan skimming off the top, Rock having issues with the Connect. In 406, shortly after Kanan left the apartment, he went over to his storage unit where he's now storing his cash. However, watching him from afar was OC, the little snake. I once said if Effie and Diana were sorted into houses in Harry Potter, they'd definitely be Slytherins, and OC is definitely the same. He's just slithering like a snake. Now there are a couple of scenarios that I can think of that could play out going forward. 1. OC giving this information to Unique and him robbing Kanan once again. 2. Kanan finds out and deals with OC himself. Or number 3, just like we saw Peaches steal Franklin Saint's stash and basically disappear back in Snowfall, could OC do something very similar? We've seen how he's been blaming hay fever, him always sniffing and rubbing his nose, and I do wonder if he is an addict. There's definitely a high chance. If so, could he potentially make a Peaches move from Snowfall, where he hits the stash himself and just disappears? He gets out of Kanan's way and also Unique's wrath. So those are just 2 or 3 scenarios to definitely keep in mind. The Peaches scenario could very well play out. Now with Lou, we saw him in his recovery meeting, where he was opening up about losing Famous. He was doing the complete opposite of Kanan. Instead of bottling up his emotions, he was speaking about them. He said if this was before, he would have cracked open a bottle and done some bad shit, which he would have regretted for the rest of his life. And we know exactly what he means. He's talking about what he went through back in season 3. He was really struggling to come to terms with D-Wiz, what happened to Scrappy, and then having to put down Scrappy's moms, and this really is a big test for Lou. It's the first real hard moment he's had to face after coming back to Queens, which is exactly what I said in my breakdown for episode 402. The real test isn't going through the rehab over at Cedar Shores. The real test starts when he comes back to Queens. How does he handle being in his own thoughts? How does he handle death? How does he handle these moments which will test his patience? There's definitely going to be a few moments which trigger him. This situation with Famous, this situation with B-Rilla, those are just a few real tests for Lou. With Jukebox, she takes Marvin's gun, which we know he kept in the same spot just for emergencies. This was back in episode 210. But this is the complete opposite of how Lou's feeling. You can tell by Jukebox's demeanor, the way she's changed her hair to the way the older Jukebox had it back in Power, the look of anger, the look of revenge, the smirk that we saw at the end of episode 404 when she pulled the trigger and caught her first body in Aaron. She wants more, and this is the Jukebox you definitely don't want to be messing with.
And them's the motherfuckers you gotta fear the most, cause they dead already. They just don't know it yet.
Now with law enforcement, we saw Detective Garcia in conversation with Famous's moms. She wanted nothing to do with Garcia, because when she went to law enforcement for help when he first went missing, which was around 3 months ago, they fobbed her off, even though Famous was actually assisting and cooperating. So, in this conversation, we actually got a few more details we didn't know before, which is quite important. The first thing, Sean was actually assisting NYPD in the murder of a police officer, which most likely has to be Detective Howard. He was the latest cop that was killed in episode 310. Detective Shannon Beck was also taken off the chessboard early in 301, but they mention again in episode 402. Her death is still considered a suicide, so most likely, it does seem like Famous was actually assisting in the death of Detective Howard. Now, what did Famous actually know about Howard? I really don't think he actually knew much. He helped him get out of a tight jam back in season 2. He then looked in Kanan's bag and found the DNA results where he initially questioned the initials of MH, but he never really connected the dots back to MH being Malcolm Howard. So, we don't exactly know what he told law enforcement. Did he mention Ronnie? Did he mention Kanan? Did he mention Rock? At this moment in time, we can't be 100% sure, but directly from Garcia and also his mom's back in 405, he was assisting them before he disappeared. Now, this also goes back to my original thoughts after my Who Did It breakdown from last week. If law enforcement did let Famous go, then you would have to assume he was giving them something or promised them that he could lead them to whatever they wanted. We know they were after the sharks, the likes of the Thomases, the likes of the Italians, not small fish like Famous or Freddie Williams. They definitely don't care about small fish. But if Famous was assisting law enforcement, Andre Barnes was someone who had intel within the NYPD. Could there have been a scenario where he was fed information that a kid named Sean Figueroa, street name Famous, was pulled in by the feds and he was talking, assisting the feds in regards to Howard's death? Because if he did, you can assume this information would have been fed back to Marvin, Rock, or even both. If that is the case, then there's no way Rock would ever risk Famous being alive, especially if he was talking to the feds. We've seen what Rock had Lou do before. We've seen how she pulled the trigger on Scrappy in season 2 when she thought he was a snake. All the signs at this moment in time definitely point to Marvin based on this particular teaser that was released before season 4, as well as Rock potentially being involved. From a timeline perspective, Lou was in rehab, Howard and Ronnie were dead, Jukebox was in basic training. I can't personally see it being unique, because having one of the Thomases behind it, it would just cause so many complications for the Thomases, and we know, raising Kanan is a family drama. So, who does it realistically leave? I personally don't believe it was Freddy's crew after 406, so that just leaves Marvin or Rock, potentially even both. Now, something else that was also new to us, which was number 2. Garcia mentioned how the evidence suggests Famous was tortured, and if it is true, if Famous was tortured, I really don't know what to think. As I said before, Famous really was a likable character, but let's see how this all unfolds, because you do have to assume they would have to give us the answers in a flashback. At some point in the near future, we definitely will learn the truth. Now, as the news starts to filter through the streets in terms of Famous's death, his body being found, people were of course going to talk. There's going to be whispers, rumors spreading across the streets. 95% of it will definitely be bullshit, but Kanan can only work with what he's been given. So, Trank said that this fiend that they serve over at the 40s said that it was Freddie Williams' crew that took out Famous, and now Kanan had something to finally work with. However, when he was scoping them out a bit later on in the episode, there were 4 of them and only 1 of him. He was outnumbered and they were also strapped. There was also no way Kanan could take them on his own. He definitely needed Jukebox's help. Meanwhile, with Juke, we saw her at an abandoned warehouse running through some target practice. She was keeping sharp, keeping occupied, and definitely staying ready. Now with Rock, we know she's someone who takes death on the chin. That's what she told Lou towards the end of season 2 episode 10 when they had this feisty conversation. She knows that this is a part of the game, snitches get got, but time waits for no one, and at this moment in time she had no connect after being cut off by Quan. So she didn't have time to worry about Famous or anything else. Her top priority was securing this pipeline with the Afghans. So we saw her in a meeting with Hafiz and Stefano. We heard them discussing logistics, how Hafiz would have to build a complete separate infrastructure, put more people in place to get this pipeline up and running, especially for Rock. He's going to be building a completely new structure just to accommodate Rock's deal, which she did get at her price. Again, Rock does normally get what she wants. She's a very tough negotiator. When you make a deal with Rock, best believe it's going to be her way or the highway. Now soon after, she actually came over to see Kanan because she wanted to share the good news with him. The new pipeline is secured and it is going to be up and running in a few weeks. But she actually met with Crystal again. And on Crystal, I genuinely think she actually kinda likes Crystal. She can tell that she's a very intelligent girl, but she told her to keep an eye on Kanan because he's not right at this moment in time after Famous's death. And Crystal definitely cares a lot for Kanan. You can tell from these past few episodes with small things such as giving him the right advice, trying to make an effort with Duke, admitting that she was wrong for what she did before, staying awake on the sofa until he comes home. You only do that if you really worry for someone or care about someone. I mean, my granddad always used to stay awake till I got home, and I'm sure many of you guys have been in the same position. So it's definitely the little things with Crystal where you can tell she cares a lot for Kanan. That's why she doesn't want to see him do anything crazy. But just like Crystal was waiting for Kanan, Marvin was also waiting for Duke. Now, this conversation was heavily loaded with a lot of emotion, because both characters were kind of grappling with grief, their identity, the toxic legacy of their family, and also who they were. This is where I do want to kind of dive deep into the psyche of both Marvin and also Duke. For Marvin, he basically is a kind of mess of contradictions at this moment. We know he's a family muscle, impulsive and violent, but this conversation with Duke, he says he kind of regrets who he is. In terms of Amos's death, it's not hit him as hard as it has for Kanan, Jukebox or Lou, but he's still kind of stuck in this cycle of hating himself for who he is and also who he's become. He was basically warning Duke because of his own flaws. The only good thing I'm good for is bad. If she was doing what he'd do, she'd be doing shit wrong. And I think here's where both of them were kind of muddled in their own thoughts. Jukebox couldn't understand what Marvin was saying because she's too deep in her own head with trying to deal with everything that she's recently been through. For Marvin, he's trying to guide Jukebox to do better, but you can definitely tell he kind of lacks the clarity to kind of advise Duke. But the fact that Jukebox said she's basically him, she's already there, it's a huge red flag in itself. She's already a mirror of Marvin, and all Famous's death is going to do, just like we spoke about Kanan before, it's going to rip away at her soul that bit more. At this moment in time, she's so lost in her own thoughts, she can't even process Marvin's warning, let alone act on it. All Jukebox is thinking right now is revenge. Now, ironically, even though Marvin doesn't want Jukebox to mirror him, there will be a scene coming up pretty soon where we will see him returning the gun to Jukebox. So, let's see what triggers the change in Marvin's stance. Now, because earlier on Kanan couldn't deal with Freddy's crew, he came to look for Jukebox's help. And Marvin is definitely quite funny. He knew that Jukebox took his gun from the sofa before, but he didn't go and find another hiding space for it. All he did was move it to the other side. Only Marvin. But as Kanan and Duke decide to hit Freddy's crew, even Kanan is now beginning to notice the change in Jukebox, and it definitely wasn't just the army that did this to her. It's a combination of things. Just like we said earlier in the conversation with Marvin, it's everything dating back to season 1. And Jukebox really was mad. She was ready to drop all 4. I think she wanted to drop all of them. She was just itching to pull the trigger. However, this is where they mentioned they had law enforcement put him down. They heard around the way that Famous knew about some cops being dirty. They got scared of him talking and put him down. So, now they're getting somewhere. The story kind of matches up to what Garcia said earlier. But again, on Jukebox, she really wanted blood. The fact that she said she'd come for their people and then leave them till the end, that really is the cold Duke we know from Power.
This way you break him twice. Once in the pocket, once in the heart. Kill his kid, you ride off into the sunset.
It's very reminiscent to what Jukebox told Kanan. They were going to hit Ghost twice, once in the pocket and then through the heart. I do also think we are going to get a real savage moment from Duke pretty soon as well. If it's not in season 4, then it's definitely going to be in season 5. You can definitely tell ever so slowly, she's turning into a monster, and she's going to become even worse than Marvin. Now with Lou, he was trying to get back to business as usual. We saw him in the studio with B-Rilla, but they did warn us before season 4. He was going to be someone who was raw and volatile, and this is why. Lou wanted him to go deeper in terms of his lyrics, but the way he stepped up to Lou in the studio, that's something you definitely don't want to do. The last time someone messed with Lou back at Bulletproof Records, Lou flipped the switch, and we all know how it ended for Crown. So, I definitely don't think we've heard the last of this one, which I think you could tell through this conversation back in 403. I asked the question, is B-Rilla worth the trouble he's going to come with? Will he be too much to handle? Earlier on in the breakdown, we were talking about Lou potentially getting back in the game and making an exception for Famous at some point, but I do think there are going to be a few triggers with Lou, and B-Rilla could definitely be one of them. The fact that they're also adding more depth to his character in terms of him having a baby, him having to take care of Michelle and his daughter, provide for them financially, I think we all know where this story could potentially be heading. But just going back to that conversation back in 403, again, I'm sure we all clocked the fact that Mr. Gelfand mentioned he's pretty old school, he doesn't trust in banks, and he keeps his cash at home. We all knew it was a big mistake. Lo and behold, B-Rilla came to see an old friend to discuss how they could potentially rob Mr. Gelfand. However, could it also be a potential setup? Did he mention it on purpose, knowing that B-Rilla would look to target his cash? Only time will tell. I do think we will see it play out in 407, because B-Rilla said they need to act quick, but he's definitely going to thicken the plot with Lou, that's for sure. Sooner or later, I think he's going to have enough of B-Rilla, and we know Lou can flip a switch. If B-Rilla continues pressing his buttons, he's definitely going to regret messing with Lou, that's for sure. Now, elsewhere with Lou, at this moment in time, he's just lost in his own thoughts, just like Marvin, just like Jukebox. So he was thinking about having a drink, but he called Jess. He just can't stop thinking about Famous. And I think the fact that he wants to work with this new white kid in the studio, maybe he's trying to replace something he can't. But we saw Lou and Jess get real close again, which caused a bit of a problem with Imani Okoye a bit later on. She saw Jessica's necklace and earrings on the side in the studio, and she definitely wasn't happy. Now, I did for a second have a thought whether Jessica could potentially be thrown into the category of CIs, a potential confidential informant that we've been talking about over the past few weeks. Imani Okoye definitely still remains on the list, and so does Jackie. But the fact that Jessica said she was off to LA, I do think we can probably rule her out as a CI or working with law enforcement. I mean, if she was, then I do think she'd kind of need to stick around Queens to get information for them, but that's not the case. But in terms of the Figueroa family, that might actually be the end. We may never see the Figueroas ever again. Now, in terms of Rock's operation, they had a real problem with David and Erwin. Erwin is someone who's actually falling in line, luckily, although we don't know how long that will last either. He's more so agreeing to Rock's demands, more so out of fear. But after Marvin killed Terry, they now have to deal with this. A loose cannon that can't be controlled. That's what he is, and that's a real problem for Marvin and Rock. Doing business with someone like David, who's probably not the most business savvy, someone who seems like he's going to be coked out of his face 24/7, is going to be real hard work. David is a complete disaster just waiting to happen, which is all Marvin's fault. Rock told him to go hard on Terry, but not too hard, and now she's put this responsibility on Marvin. She wants him to keep David in line, which I don't think is such a good idea. Marvin's been quite trigger happy in season 4, making all sorts of sloppy mistakes and also lying to Rock. And another is with the Italians and Early Tyler. At this moment, between Stefano and Marvin's cut from the Corona operation, he's not happy with the profit that's left over, but Marvin just simply doesn't care. He said it isn't his problem. However, I do think it is, because Stefano made it explicitly clear in 404.
You are vouching for your friend here, and that shouldn't be taken lightly. Any mistakes, I'll be looking at you, Marvin.
Now, we know Early Tyler is someone who's motivated by the green, and at this moment in time, this Corona operation isn't sustainable or bringing enough money for his liking. So, what are his options? This is where I do think he's going to make a very dirty move behind Marvin, which is going to leave Marvin in a heap of trouble with the Italians. I think they've already foreshadowed it with Stefano's warning, so definitely just one to keep in mind. Now, just before we dive deep into all things Unique and his chess moves, Joyce Thomas is someone who's slowly deteriorating. Marvin couldn't bring himself to see Joyce after what she asked of him back in 405, so instead, she asked Lou. Again, this was met with resistance. Now, this is where I do wonder whether she's gonna ask Kanan.
How could you kill someone you love?
Some say you're not a real killer till you do.
Back in Power, we heard Kanan telling Tariq, "You ain't a real killer till you kill someone you love." And he definitely has a lot of love for his grandma, that's for sure. But could she really ask Kanan to put her out of her misery? Now, let's add it to the scene where he took out this old woman back in Breeze's old apartment. I mean, it's definitely something Kanan could potentially do. Let's see. I mean, to be honest, I really don't think Joyce has too many episodes left. Maybe episode 407 is probably her last. But over to Unique. Now, towards the end of 405, Unique met with Phil Russo where he asked him to get his organization back up and running before they continue this conversation. Well, he already started to put his pieces in motion towards the end of episode 5, one of them being his old connects, Juan. But if Unique is going to be taking on Rock and Stefano, then he still needs the backing of Phil Russo in terms of money and soldiers. Unique has been working in the shadows, steadily hitting Rock's operation. Those beneath her are petrified because of the death and violence, and Kwan's also cut off Rock's supply. Her product is also sitting in the warehouse collecting dust, along with problems with David after Terry's death. So, on that basis, Phil Russo was happy to work with Unique, because he also wants revenge for Sal Baselli's death back in 302. We know it is quite complicated with the Italian crime families. He can't take Stefano out himself, but he doesn't mind if Unique softens him up for him, because then his own people will do it for him. And so, like I mentioned about these Italians, they really are slimy, someone that could fight his battles for him. Now, he also gave Unique a connection out in Trenton, who goes by the name Akbar. But before he went over to Trenton, we did see him back at his tailor shop, saying he wants to look like he never left. He was getting fitted up with a new look, which definitely was needed. He'd been in that all black attire for around 6 months, but he was now getting fitted up with a new look, getting a fresh haircut, a trim, and also new pieces of jewelry. And well, Unique is officially back. Not Breeze, Unique. Now, this is where he put the final pieces of his organizations in place before he went to surprise Rock. He made a deal with Akbar out in Trenton, because he had the soldiers that he needed. They came at a high price, but that wasn't a problem for Unique. He's now got the backing of both Quan and Phil Russo. So now that Unique has the backing of a member of the Italian crime families, now that he's got his connect back, now that he's got his organization up and running and the soldiers that he needs, it was now time to show his face again. So, as Rock came home, this look was absolutely priceless. Again, circling back around to the beginning, it's a look that we saw from Ghost a few times back in Power. It was a look as if she saw a ghost. She might even think that she's potentially hallucinating, dreaming, but she definitely isn't. It is real. Unique is standing in her kitchen, eating the same ice cream they were back in 302, and I really can't wait to hear what she actually has to say, because this is someone who she thought was dead and gone for 6 months. 6 months is a timeline back to 305. Imagine someone who you believe to be dead for 6 months just standing in your kitchen. It's going to be real interesting to see how Rock reacts, because I've mentioned before, everything is about to hit her like a ton of bricks all at once. Unique coming back from the dead, Joyce's death, not being able to trust Kanan, Marvin lying to her, and potentially this fallout from his moves with the Italians. Her lawyer Andre is dead, she's made a promise to Hafiz and the Afghans, but now she's got a huge competition from Unique, who's been playing the best chess game in Season 4, and it is about to be carnage in these last few, for Raising Kanan Season 4.